So hello everyone, my name is Ömer. I'm a last year PhD student at the University of Pompeu Fabra. This is my favorite color. The presentation I'm gonna present today is kind of different to the abstract I submitted, but like a lot has changed, but the core idea is more or less the same. So I'm not gonna this audience knows what overeducation is, but I'm not gonna assume, I'm gonna just explain. Overeducation is basically having a higher level of education than that is required for your job position. So let's say in a year I'm going to be done with my PhD. If I start working at an H&M branch as the branch manager, I'm going to be overeducated. That's the idea. And today I'm going to be explaining to you the relationship between age and overeducation. So without further ado, let's go with what we know from the literature about it. I have multiple title slides just to make sure. I drew this on Microsoft Paint. So if we were to have a theoretical, hypothetical graph of what the literature expects in terms of the relationship between age and overeducation, and for this graph, let's say we have on the y-axis the risk of overeducation of an individual, and on the x-axis we have the age of the individual. Literature basically expects this. So when you are very young, when you are an intern and when you just join the labor market, you are very overeducated right after your graduation, and then you basically become a manager, so you are slightly less overeducated, and eventually you become the CEO of the company, so you are not overeducated at all. And we have a very good idea about the mechanism behind that as well. So the first part, we straight away know that new graduates are more overeducated than a lot of people. We also know the mechanism between mechanism behind why they would be more overeducated. So new graduates are essentially consciously picking their jobs, so they're not picking some smaller companies where they would be matched straight away, but they basically try to go to Coca-Cola, for instance, where the career path is much more defined. And although initially they are more overeducated, eventually they're going to be much better off, let's say. We also know that basically overeducated young people are very mobile, so they move between jobs and eventually they get to become matched. And also the literature basically says that senior and older workers are not as overeducated as the rest of the population, which is basically a story that we more or less know, no? It's kind of expected. So I tried to try this myself, test this myself. I'm using the PIAAC data set here in this conference. I am using both cycles. I'm using only the university graduates and more, so master degrees and PhDs, although they are a very small part of the sample. Once I do my filtration, I filter based on some other things as well, but I'm not going to bother you with those. I end up with 33 country years, and I end up with approximately 32,000 individuals in there. I used fixed effect linear probability models, mainly because it's easier to use, but I also run everything with logit models, and the results are more or less the same. I use fixed effect models because I try to get rid of the contextual effect, and I try to just focus on to the age itself. And how do I measure overeducation, which is kind of important because there's also an academic debate in my field about how you measure overeducation actually matters, and you're measuring different things and so on and so forth. Maybe to this audience it's going to actually mean something. I'm basically measuring it the way Felici et al. In 2017 calculated them. But in case it doesn't, the way I calculate them is through 3 different ways. 2 of them are objective, 1 of them is subjective. The objective measure is essentially comparing people to their colleagues in the same country. So let's say I'm a manager in Spain and I have a master's degree. Other managers in Spain have university degrees. That's the most common education level in Spain. Then I'm overeducated because I have a master's. The second objective measure is more or less the same thing, but it's based on years in education. And the subjective measure is they come to me and they ask, what does it take to become a manager in Spain today? And if I say a high school degree is enough, but I have a master's degree, then I categorize myself as overeducated as well. So this is the background. Now, I'm going to try to create this graph in a descriptive manner. This is not based on any regressions, no nothing. And immediately you can see that the theory doesn't hold, because theory is actually kind of simple. You join the labor market as overeducated, and then you get promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted, and you're less and less overeducated eventually. And it kind of holds. Let's talk about the first objective measure. Let's say here it is basically the same graph. On the y-axis we have the risk of overeducation. On the x-axis we have the age of people, but it's age groups for the sake of simplicity. Let's talk about the first objective measure here. As you can see, although initially the overeducation risk is decreasing for a given individual, then it starts increasing. So something happens around the age of 40, 45 that is making these people more overeducated again. For the second measure, it is kind of like a pressed V shape. And although for the subjective measure it holds the most, you can see that at the very end of the career, still there is a tip going up. Again, this is not with controlling for things. This is basically a very descriptive graph. But it's kind of interesting. So there is something to dig in here. And then I went back to the literature and I found 2 other studies that are doing this. They are both very recent and they are based on 2 countries, one in Israel and one in the US. They're also finding this kind of a U-shape, which actually kind of makes sense because like this graph is actually based on some very old literature. Like this actually had been established long ago and then people basically kind of used age as a control variable for a very long time. And then 2 people, one in 2016, one in 2020, they found this kind of a relationship in 2 countries. And basically in between, a lot has changed, no? Because for instance, demographics has changed. Because initially, every new coming graduate was actually a lot bigger than one previous cohort, and therefore it was a lot easier for the corporate to protect this corporate pyramid. Or like a lot of technological advancements happened, and we know that old people are kind of disadvantaged towards the effect of technology because they graduated from the university long ago, so new graduates are probably much more up to date with their skills and so on and so forth. These are kind of speculations. The second one we are going to be testing, but things have changed. Now we are living in a different world. So at the tail end of the career, now there is something to look at. Also, all those previous works, they were mainly focusing on new graduates and young people mainly, and we basically extrapolated the effect of age to older people without actually questioning it that much. But now there is something to look at, and now we are going to look into that. And also, the experience of an old person is much more different to the experience of a younger people because the labor market gets rigid. There are some stereotypes and so on and so forth. Because there are stereotypes, they are much less involved in planning and training, and therefore they are maybe not as frequently upskilled in, and therefore the labor market doesn't help them as much. But also they get rigid as well. For instance, I'm 28, my partner just got a position in Basel. We are moving there because we can, because there is not much that is tying us to Barcelona. Would we be able to do that when we are 55? Probably not. So basically the labor market from both sides gets rigid, and therefore it's much more difficult for a match to happen. So now we are going to be testing these hypotheses based on the theories that I explained. The first main hypothesis of the paper is that I'm expecting a U-shape across those 33 country years. And then I'm going to be testing 2 mechanisms. The first one is that a job loss basically is going to be a scarring effect for older people. So when you are old and when you change or lose your job, then you are going to be overeducated. Maybe otherwise it's going to be a plateau for your overeducation risk. And the other mechanism that I'm going to be testing is maybe it is because the university education that those people got are actually obsolete at this point. And if they are not upskilling themselves, like if you are a university graduate old person without skills, then you are overeducated compared to an old person with a university degree, although with some skills due to some training and upskilling. Now we are going to be testing it. So these are the linear probability models that I mentioned at the very beginning. Here you can basically see the control variables that I have in there as well. The things you cannot see are basically fixed effect country years for space reasons, and also the sector is not there because of space reasons. What you can see here is the first column is the first objective measure, second column is the second objective measure, and the last one is the subjective measure. But I want to draw your attention to this red box over here. The coefficients are very small because essentially the dependent variable is binary, but age is not, and therefore it shrinks. But nonetheless, for the linear component of age, the coefficient is consistently negative and statistically significant. For the quadratic component, it is consistently positive and statistically significant. What does it mean when we plot it as marginal effects? The graph you are seeing on the right-hand side is based on the second objective measure, but all of them look the same. If you're curious, I can show you at the end of the presentation. But you're basically seeing this U-shape quite clearly, no? So when someone joins the labor market at the very beginning until the age of 40, the overeducation risk decreases and decreases and decreases and decreases, and then something happens around then, and then overeducation risk starts to increase. So it seems like it is holding. And as I said, it is true for all different measures of overeducation, and it also holds true for logit models. Now we are going to be testing the first mechanism, which is tenure. So tenure, the way I test tenure here is basically having a long tenure or not. I basically copy the homework of some other people in the literature, and it seems like the 5-year mark is the inflection point. No? So if you have a tenure that is longer than 5 years, you basically are much more rooted in the company. You basically know the tacit knowledge about the company and so on and so forth. So probably you're not overeducated. But if you have a shorter tenure than 5 years, then probably it is slightly problematic, and you need to first get used to the company. What you are going to realize is that the long tenure and age, when combined, are not statistically significant, but because long tenure is a binary variable, essentially age is capturing the effect of people with short tenure. And therefore, when we plot the marginal effects of those, we get what you are seeing on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, the red part is basically for people that are with tenures that are shorter than 5 years, and the blue line is for people with long tenures. And you can see that although it doesn't make a difference for young people, if you're an old person that is basically with a short tenure, either due to job loss or changing a job or for whatever reason, then actually you are the one that is overeducated. And finally, and this is kind of surprising to us, I interact average skill with age. And here you are going to see that neither the interacted nor the uninteracted terms are statistically significant. And here again, you can see when I plot the marginal effects plot, the skills are not making any difference, which is kind of interesting because we actually thought that like skilled older people would be still all right, but underskilled older people would be overeducated, because when you think about it, they both are university graduates, but someone is going to be at the, like sitting at the lower position at the corporate hierarchy, and someone is going to be matched. But it seems like it is kind of negligible, like we are not finding any effect there. So before I finish, this is like the 4th or 5th time I'm presenting this. So when I presented it in like previous times, a lot of people complained about a lot of things. These are the things that they complained about that I checked, so we should be happy about them. So some people basically said, okay, so the literature had established that it was a linear relationship between age and overeducation. Now you are saying it's quadratic, but what if it is cubic? Well, it's not. So basically, the best fit is the quadratic one, and introduction of the cubic one actually increases the coefficient of the quadratic one. And also theoretically, it's much more difficult to explain a cubic relationship. As I said, the logit models are looking exactly the same as the linear probability models. I can show them if you want to. They are, like, some people basically said that, okay, this is a simple linear probability model, so like because of that you have a lot of observations, it's probably decreasing your standard errors. I inflate them based on clustering. They are still significant, although subjective is significant at the 90% level, but the others are fine. And also some people said maybe it is like there are a couple of countries that are driving the results. That is also not the case. I basically one by one remove all the clusters, and the results like stay within the same 95% statistical significance range. So to finish, what does this all mean? It seems like based on my findings, the relationship between age and overeducation is quadratic, at least nowadays, like since basically the first cycle of PIAAC, so 2012. And this effect is observed across country years. So this is not a specific country, this is not the US, this is not Israel, this is actually across these country years that are happening more or less. We also established that the job change actually leaves some scars, or like a job loss leaves some scars in the careers of older workers. They have a much less runway, and therefore they cannot basically make up for that and come back to match again, or maybe for some other reason, but they remain overeducated. But surprising to us, the potential effect of the university education and the skills acquired during the university education becoming obsolete, and therefore all people becoming overeducated, that effect is very negligible. With that said, thank you very much. I'm proud of these slides.